Metaphysics of St. Thomas. Well, when I was a child, I always had a great sort of a longing to understand. I used to climb trees and get up to all the high places I could, just trying to understand, sort of sit there looking over things. And metaphysicians traditionally back through history, or very often, have been associated with mountains. Great metaphysicians have always loved mountains. And I didn't know that, of course, but St. Thomas was brought at the age of 6 up to the great monastery of Monte Cassino to be educated by the Benedictines, and that's way up, if you've seen it on a height, looking out all over the surrounding valleys. But the connection with metaphysics and heights and mountains is that when you're high up like that, you can see how everything fits together. All the valleys and mountains, how they all fit together to make a pattern. When you're down low, you can see the individual parts, but you can't see how it fits together. And that physical overview vision seems to be a kind of analog of seeing how the whole universe fits together. So I had that desire first. Then I first went to study philosophy over in the island of Jersey with the French Jesuits. We had a wonderful faculty back in 1936 to 39, just before the war. We got the last boat back before the war. Rather a close call, but still. But there we had a wonderful group of professors, and there I was introduced. There was a wonderful, dynamic, fairly young professor of metaphysics who was a Thomist, and he introduced me to the really dynamic contemporary Thomism. I just loved it, and just expanded like a flower in my mind. And so that got me interested in St. Thomas. And then I read, there's just a couple of really great books that sort of made me as a philosopher. One was Joseph Marichal, the Belgian Jesuit, who wrote a book called The Point of Departure of Metaphysics in French, in about 5 volumes. He went all through the history of philosophy, always looking at each philosopher from the central point of view of St. Thomas, what he was missing. So there was a kind of a thread going through it. Well, it was leading up to St. Thomas, and St. Thomas as a synthesis, and then going on further. And that was a tremendous illumination to me, getting a central point of view in the whole history of philosophy, and St. Thomas as the most synthetic and powerful metaphysical thinker to be able to put that together. So that had a tremendous influence on me. And the other great book was that of Blondel, Action, his famous 1893 Action, which was all the dynamism of the will this time, towards the infinite, all through the finites. So that was a very powerful, and Marichal's book, he was the founder of what is called Transcendental Thomism. That is Thomism that builds on the dynamism of the spirit, the a priori conditions, somewhat like Kant, but more realistic. And Marichal was built on the dynamism of intelligence towards being, and Blondel's book was built on the dynamism of the will towards the good. So those two, from different points of view, were giving the same view of the human spirit. And then the metaphysics worked out all the details. So that's what caught me and sort of blew my mind. So my mind was blown from then on. I just love metaphysics, and so I've taught it ever since. But I'm into what I got over there partly was what they call existential metaphysics, existential Thomism, and that's a very important thing in the more dynamic contemporary Thomism. The existential Thomism is one that realized, which was not recognized by the early disciples, who thought St. Thomas was just an Aristotelian with a Christian adaptation. But he's made much more than that. Aristotle was still focused on form and essence as the center of gravity of all reality. St. Thomas penetrated through to the act of existence as deeper than essence and the most profound component of all reality, so that there was a shift of the center of gravity in St. Thomas from essence and form, which had been there in all the Greeks. Essence and form were the principal things, and the good, but a shift to existence as the more radical center of gravity and the unity of all reality. So that that highlighting of existence. He's one of the few, if not one of the only great philosophers in history to have done that, really, to have focused on existence explicitly. They all take existence for granted, of course. They take it for granted and then forget about it and examine what things are like and how they work. But he insisted on putting that in the center. Existence is the central piece of the whole thing. And then God becomes pure act of existence and all creatures limited acts of existence. So that viewpoint of everything centered around existence is called Existential Thomism. It was brought in by Gilson in 1939, his famous preface to the 5th edition of his Thomism book, by de Finance, the French Jesuit, in 1939, brought in by a number of Thomists all around the year 1939. So I was just getting the beginning of that. When I went back for graduate studies, I soaked myself in that. So mine is what they call an existential Thomism. And that's quite a richer and deeper kind of understanding of St. Thomas that the people before it didn't quite get hold of clearly. So it's really a 20th century understanding of St. Thomas, and the texts are clear now, but it took time to recognize the point in St. Thomas.